Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. My name is Ari, and today we're going to have some more stories about our toxic life. But before we start, it would be so much appreciated if you would subscribe to my channel, like the video, if you enjoy it, and maybe leave a comment down below. These simple clicks would mean a lot to the future of this channel and really reward the effort that I put in every day. And now without further ado, let's go. Today's first story. In this story, OP was married for about 5 years and discovered his newborn daughter wasn't biologically his after a paternity test. Despite their initially happy relationship, he found out about his wife's affair through her texts. Choosing not to raise a child from infidelity, he decided to divorce her. Now let's get into the story. I, 28 male, have been with my wife, 29 female, for about 5 years. We got married about 3 years ago, and admittedly, we did get married young. But when it feels right, you just have to go with it. So I proposed and she accepted. Things were very good for us. Then she found out she was pregnant. I was nervous at first, but then I became over the moon when I realized I was going to be a father. All I needed was to get over some of those initial nerves. I'd always wanted a family. I never really had a timeline of when I wanted to have a kid, and the two of us hadn't talked about it either. We weren't actively trying, but if it happened, it happened. That was my mindset set at least. Things truly seemed good. We were married, had our own home, were successful in our careers, and were finally having our first child. I went to all the appointments because that was what a good husband and soon-to-be father did. At every appointment, everything seemed to be great. We eventually found out it was going to be a girl, which only seemed to increase our happiness. I really can't get across how good everything seemed. Nothing seemed out of place, and I had no inkling anything was wrong. My wife never acted strange, like picking fights, being suspicious, disappearing, or anything along those lines. I've tried to look back to see if there were any red flags, but I'm telling you, they weren't any. It all came out of the blue. Maybe that's how good she was at playing the part of a dutiful wife. Anyway, then she went into labor. Things were fine. It was a long labor and she did have a hard time at certain points, but then she gave birth to a beautiful baby girl who looked nothing like me or my wife. After they cleaned her up, it became even more apparent that she looked nothing like me. Now I understand a child isn't always going to be the spitting image of you, but this child's facial features were just so out of place. She was a lovely little girl, but I was filled with the strange feeling that she might not be mine. I told myself it was ridiculous, because she never gave me any reason to think she was cheating on me. When it came time to sign the birth certificate, my wife was pushy and insistent that I sign it. I didn't because there was a little voice in my head telling me I shouldn't. It was difficult to avoid the subject, but I pushed it off. There was an argument, but she let it drop. That was even stranger. Why would she let it drop if she truly believed I was the father? From here, I felt confused and wondered if I was being a total jerk about this. This was supposed to be my first child, but instead of happiness, I just felt dread. A whole lot of dread and not a drop of happiness. The only way to solve this was to ask for a paternity test. I kept putting it off until one day I got a chance to look at my wife's phone when she walked away to feed the baby and left it there unlocked. I didn't even have to dig that deep. In her texts, I found a bunch of messages to this man who she thought was the father of the baby. The guy's name was familiar. He was a relative of one of her friends, but never did I think she was cheating on me with him. When she came back, I knew I had to confront her. I told her what I found and asked if the baby could be his. She admitted the baby could be, but said even if she was, it didn't matter. We could still be a family. From there, my course of action was clear. I had to demand a paternity test, so I left and moved in with my brother across town while we pursued the paternity test. The results of the test ended up showing that I wasn't the father. I felt a lot of different emotions after I read that. Part of me was thrilled because now I could walk away with no connections to her, but I also was devastated because I had started to bond a little bit with this child. However, I couldn't raise a child that wasn't mine. It just wasn't something I had in me or would ever consider doing. From there, I decided it was time to get a divorce. My wife kept begging me not to leave and how we could make it work. Come to find out, the other guy had pretty much dipped out of the situation. She had no idea where he was or how to get a hold of him, so I was the second option for her to not do this alone. I refused and continued to stick to my guns. My family also mourned because they were excited by the idea of having a new grandkid. One day they'd get a grandkid from me, but it wasn't going to be yet. For a little while my wife did fight the divorce, but I guess the exhaustion from being a single mother took its toll. She agreed to sign the papers. I didn't care if she kept the house. Her parents had gotten it for us anyway. All I wanted was a clean break from the woman. It's been about a year since the divorce papers were signed, and I can safely say I am living my best life. I've finally decided to start dating again, but I'm dipping my toe into the dating pool very gently. There is someone I am seeing casually, but it'll be a while before I'll be ready to even consider making it serious. My now ex-wife hasn't been doing very well from what I've heard. The actual father of the baby is still at MIA, but honestly, it's not my problem. She's been leaving the baby a lot with her parents, who are starting to get sick of her crap. They probably don't want to raise another child, which I understand. Her parents should be enjoying their retirement and not raising their grandchild. She's reached out to me a few times. I did pick up once, but only because I didn't realize she was calling. I'd been expecting a call and just answered without thinking. When I realized it was her, I told her that there was no reason for us to speak and hum up. It's hard to say what she was thinking when she called me. I think she was still pretty desperate to find someone to help raise the baby with her, since her parents were getting sick of babysitting. She needed to either leave the kid if she wanted to go out and party. Working was one thing, but going out and partying was something else entirely. The only one I feel sorry for here is the kid. She is going to have a hard life with a mother who values herself more than her kid. If it had been mine, I would have been there every moment I could. But she's not mine, and as I said, I will not raise a kid that is the result of an affair. Adoption is a different story. I am considering moving out of state to get an even cleaner break. It depends on how this new promotion goes at my job. If everything goes well, I'll be out of here by the year. The distance is going to send my ex-wife into a tailspin, but for me, it'll be exactly what I need. Today's second story. In this story, OP was married to his wife for about 17 years, including 14 years of marriage. On Memorial Day, he discovered her affair when overhearing her express love for someone else. Despite her attempts to reconcile and stay married while also seeing her affair partner, he decided to divorce. The divorce is nearly finalized, and he finds support from his own family and friends. Now let's get into the story. My wife, 38, and I, 47, were together for roughly about 17 years. About 14 of them were spent with us married. When we first met, I thought she was older than she was. It was just the mature aura she gave off. She thought I was younger, which at the time did make me feel pretty good. After we decided that the age difference didn't matter, we went all in on the relationship. I was still a little hesitant about the age difference, but then I met her family. Her family was very big, bigger than mine. I'd always wished I had grown up in a close, tight-knit family. I'm the first to admit that her family, who welcomed me with open arms, is a huge factor in my continuing the relationship. She seemed just as crazy about her family as well. I took that as a good sign. A possible wife who thinks family is everything is a plus. The two of us went on to have a family of our own, 2 boys ages 8 and 11. During our marriage, things were good. We got along great, made memories with each other and our kids, and just enjoyed life. Anytime there were issues, we ended up working through them and persevering. I put my entire being in this relationship, like I had hobbies as any married guy did. Hunting, fishing, and golfing were all things I loved, but after our kids came, I knew the focus had to be on our sons. Our wife didn't get the memo because she didn't hold herself to the same standards. My wife seemed focused on our marriage and family at first, but slowly she started to become a very shallow and self-centered person. She didn't put the kids first or even consider me. I tried my best to accept these behavior changes and keep putting the work into our marriage. It all came crashing down on Memorial Day of all days. I was getting the boys ready for the holiday party when I heard my wife's muffled voice from the bathroom talking to someone. My curiosity got the best of me, and I ended up standing there listening. I couldn't hear who was on the other end of the phone, but I heard her. She was telling whoever she was on the phone with that she loved them, couldn't wait to be with them, and every day she spent with her husband, me, took a little part of her soul. So, I waited for her to come out of the bathroom. When she realized I had heard what she said on the phone, she was in shock. My wife didn't say anything at first. I asked if she was cheating, and she stuttered, trying to come up with some lame excuse. I told her to save it and walked out because I had a party to get to. My boys having a good holiday is what was my main focus. That was D-Day for me, and it's safe to say that the holiday is going to be sullied for me shortly. I'll never let my boys know, because I want them to enjoy the holiday and spend time with family. The reason I still attended with my kids was to keep up appearances. It was very hard to keep a smile on my face, but again, I did it for the boys. They will always be who I put first in all of this. My wife didn't go with us. She decided to go straight to the AP for comfort, ironically enough. When she finally came home from her AP, I asked her what happened. According to my soon-to-be ex-wife, I lacked passion and didn't show her any attention. I repulsed her, as she lovingly pointed out to me. She managed to say all of this while trying to butter me up with compliments about being a trusting husband, great provider and father. I just was a terrible lover. However, she wanted to stay married and keep living in the marital home while remaining with her AP. I was shocked by that. My wife wanted her cake and to eat it too. She gets the stability of remaining with me and the apparent passion with this jerk she cheated on me with. Speaking of the AP, I knew the guy. He had been over to my house and I'd even hung out with him. The guy knew everything that was going on. I was busy working and coaching sports teams for our sons while she was screwing around with him behind my back. After the shock wore off, I realized I had to file for divorce. It should be done by the end of the year, which is getting closer and closer by the minute. She was against it and tried to convince me we could stay married. If not for us, then because of the boys. They deserve to be raised in a two-parent household. I'm not going to lie, I nearly burst out laughing when she said this. Was I tempted to do it for a moment, but then I realized it wasn't fair to my boys to do that. I didn't want to stay in a terrible relationship just for their sake. This wasn't something I wanted to emulate for them. If they ever, God forbid, found themselves in this position, then I would want them to retain some dignity and do what was best for them and their family. Besides, kids pick up on more things than we realize. I've learned this since my boys started therapy to deal with the situation. I'm also in therapy, before you ask, so don't worry. My mental health is also being worked on. When news of the affair reached our friends and family, it didn't go the way she expected. Her own family didn't rally around her. Instead, they rallied around me, which I cannot begin to say was a huge help in the healing process. Because I fear I might lose my in-laws in the divorce process. The funny thing is, her boyfriend isn't allowed anywhere at her parents' house or any family functions, while my boys and I are more than welcome. She refuses to attend without the AP, so she and her family have no contact. I talk more to her mother than she does now. They used to talk 2 times a day, but now the contact is non-existent. For the holidays this year, my boys and I were gladly invited. I'm going to go, just not for the sake of my boys, but also because I enjoy being around the family. Recently, it seems that even our acquaintances are beginning to see through my wife's crap. There was a youth night at the high school football game that I attended with my boys. They get to go out on the field at halftime and get introduced to the team. She showed up there, but I already had a warning because she had texted me earlier that day. When she shows up, she marches over to her boys and starts taking pictures with them. I swear the moment she was done with the pictures, she left because her AP was performing at some dive bar. Is he any good? I have no idea, and I do not want to know either. After my wife left, I had 4 different sets of parents come up to me and mention something about how she stayed just long enough to get her pictures for social media. It was hard not to burst out laughing. Let me tell you, it felt really good that people could see through her crap and that she's only playing up the Mom of the Year stuff for Instagram, Facebook, or whatever other social media she's on. We'll always have to remain in some contact because of our boys. One is still in the single digits, mind you. I'm just glad other people can see who she is, and when it comes down to it, she is going to put herself first and not me or the boys. In the meantime, I'll keep taking care of my boys and myself. I've started going back to the gym, picked up some of my old hobbies again, and reconnected with old friends. I can safely say I've never been happier. Today's third story. In this story, Opie discovered that his wife had been secretly intimate with another man to get pregnant after struggling with fertility issues. Despite her excitement about the pregnancy, her behavior was suspicious. After finding incriminating messages on her phone, he confronted her and decided to divorce her. The user feels conflicted about the situation, but is relieved to have avoided further involvement. Now let's get into the story. My wife and I had been together for about 5 years when everything fell apart. We met at a farmer's market and felt a strong connection with each other. I asked her out for drinks and we had a wonderful time. We ended up dating for about a year and a half before we got married. I never thought I would get married before I met her. She flipped a switch in my brain and I realized how great something like that could be. We had discussions about starting a family after we were married, and we were both in agreement that we wanted children. After about 2 years of being married, we decided we wanted to start trying. Of course, at the beginning, we were just doing it the normal way without seeking any medical intervention or anything like that. My wife was monitoring her ovulation and making sure we were sleeping together at the prime times. However, nothing was really taking. After a while, we decided it would be best to speak to a fertility doctor. They worked with both of us to help us find the cause of our problems. I gave them a sperm sample and it turned out that I had some fertility issues. Long story short, I went for a physical and was diagnosed with celiac disease, which has a major effect on sperm motility. There was a chance that after I switched to a gluten-free diet for celiac that I could bounce back from it. It wasn't the complete end of the story for me fathering my own children. However, my wife seemed impatient. I understood why she would be. She was in her 30s, and she wanted to have 3 children, so she needed to start soon. The longer it was put off, the more risk there would be in each pregnancy. We talked about our options. There was IVF with a sperm donor, adoption, and freezing her eggs. They were all very expensive. Some time went by and I had been on my new diet for a few months, feeling great, and my wife wanted to start trying again. I don't quite think she understood how everything would work for me. I didn't think it was going to be such a quick fix after changing my diet like she did. But lo and behold, after a few months of trying, she got pregnant. It was very exciting for both of us. She found out she was pregnant later than she would have liked, but all that mattered was we were finally going to have a kid. During the pregnancy, my wife was acting off. With how excited she was to get pregnant, I thought she would enjoy it. I knew that she was likely to have a lot of mood changes and things of that sort. But it almost felt like she couldn't stand being around me. Honestly, I thought she looked down on me because of the issues I had with getting her pregnant. I hated feeling that way, but that could have also just been some of my own insecurities. I noticed that she was getting a lot of phone calls that she was being very secretive about. I would be in my office and hear her whispering with someone on the phone. She would be texting with her phone obviously facing away from me, and she would step away from me sometimes when she would take calls. It started rubbing me the wrong way, but I didn't say anything about it. One afternoon, I was sitting on the couch next to her when she left her phone behind before going to the bathroom. Ever since she had been pregnant, she took a lot longer in the bathroom than she normally did. So I knew I would have a couple of minutes to look through it. My curiosity had really gotten the better of me. When I looked through her phone, I found a conversation between her and another man about her pregnancy. I didn't know who it was right away, so I scored through the messages looking for any indication of who they were. What I gathered was that he was a man who she met online and had intimate with. At the very top of their message exchanges, they had a clear conversation about how she was going to meet up with him exclusively for unprotected intimacy so she could get pregnant. He agreed to it, and in that conversation, mentioned how they wouldn't contact each other after. Even after that first meeting, they continued to meet with each other. They were continuing an intimate relationship through their messages, as well as in person when they had the opportunity to. What bothered me the most about all of that was how she told him that she was pregnant a day before she told me. Of course, it wasn't my child, but I thought it was up until that point. In the recent messages, he kept mentioning how he wanted to be in his kid's life. My heart was completely in my stomach when I was reading all of that. My wife told him that wasn't an option. He knew what their deal was when they got together. She wanted to get pregnant, so she hooked up with a complete stranger to do so. The guy was practically begging her to consider being with him. I sent myself as many screenshots of their conversation as I could, and I put the phone back down before my wife got back. I pretended like I had just been called into work, so I could leave and avoid being around her. I had a lot of things I needed to figure out, and I didn't want to be around her to do it. I went to my sister's house, and I told her about everything, showing her the messages that I had. She was as shocked as I was about it all. She was the one who pretty much convinced me that I had to leave her. I met up with her the following day, and she introduced me to a friend of hers who was a divorce attorney. We started putting everything in motion so I could serve her with the papers. I didn't know anything about the guy she cheated on me with, so I tried to do some digging to find out who he was. He knew that she was married when they hopped up, and I just thought that was disgusting. I found out that he was the owner of a small home renovation company. He mostly serviced local houses, but it seemed like his business was really picking up. After everything was settled with the attorney, I went to my wife and I brought her the papers. She was shocked to see what I was doing. I told her that I didn't want to be with a cheater, and she understood that I found out what happened. She tried to make it seem like it was my fault that she cheated. She tried to make it seem like it was my fault that I had a disease that affected my ability to conceive a child. She made it seem like I forced her hand into cheating. I didn't want to hear any of it, so I just ignored her lame excuses and told her that I would see her in court. As for the man she slept with, I decided that I was going to ruin his business. I left reviews on all of the social media pages planning what happened. Everybody always looks at the one-star reviews when they're looking at them. I knew that I would get their attention. He countered by getting some of them removed, but I kept putting them up. I hoped that it would lose him a fair amount of business if the husband saw my review about how he knowingly slept with a married woman and got her pregnant. They likely wouldn't want to work with him. My wife and I got divorced, and I found out through the grapevine that she and the other man ended up trying to be together. However, they did not work out. She had to move out of the house that we lived in together because she couldn't afford it on her own. And she had to have joint custody of her kid with a virtual stranger to her. I feel bad for the child. No kid should be born into the world with two parents who don't love each other. I know they're probably going to have a lot of issues growing up, and in some ways, I wish I never found out about this so I could have been there for them. But I'm glad that I got out before I was involved in their life anyway.